Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Powerhouse U. Today, I am accompanied by Mia Jackson. And what Mia Jackson does is she works in supportive housing for low income or no income families on Skid Row in the Los Angeles area. So I'm going to let Mia give you guys a brief overview of what she does, and then we're just going to have a quick little Q&A session, and she's going to give us more information and education when it comes to supportive housing in the state of emergency that the city's in right now for these low and no income families and individuals. So thank you for coming.
Awesome.
I
Thank
appreciate you.
thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've been looking forward to doing this for a while. So like Jacqueline said, my name is Mia Jackson. I work for a company that provides permanent supportive housing and intensive case management to individuals in the Skid Row community of Los Angeles. I've been working in housing and development for like over 20 years now. So that's kind of been like the focus of my career. And so for those that don't know, permanent supportive housing means that you're not just giving a person a home or a room based on their income. It also comes with case management services that provides them resources for work, medical resources, counseling, mental health, any of those type of things that they may need to get them acclimated, back into the regular mainstream society with the goal of getting them into a regular apartment.
Okay. And one of the things that you and I talked about in our previous conversation is the work that actually goes into placing these individuals. Because not only is it you can't just pick an apartment and say, stay here and you live here and congratulations. There's actually a process in order to get them resituated to actually being indoors. Can you explain a little bit how that happens and what the process looks like?
Sure. So based on the type of housing that a company may provide, there's different ways or processes that a person can get involved. The main thing that a person that is experiencing homelessness should do is connect with LA County and kind of get into the coordinated entry system. And that's abbreviated as CES. So you hear a lot of people talk about CES. And that is like almost like a universal waiting list for housing. So companies that have different types can go and request referrals, whether it's like a DV placement, a permanent supportive housing, a family, based on that person's their intake, the level, their acuity level, meaning the level of help that they need, the experience that they've had, the amount of time that they've been homeless. All of those things are factors into getting them placed into housing. And one of the parts that I brought up in our conversation is that we hear a lot of talk on like social media and in the news that they just say, let's build units. And there's more to housing someone than just building a unit. This is why we have permanent supportive housing, because people have additional needs. They need someone to continue to help them pay their rent if they don't have a source of income. They may need help with pots, pans, household needs, paying their utility bills if they would have any, cell phones, getting connected to free providers, internet service, and then just being acclimated to being indoors again. A lot of people believe that homelessness is connected to mental health and drug abuse, but a lot of people fall into homelessness for financial reasons. And maybe 5 or 10 years on the street, you can develop some sort of mental illness. You can develop a substance abuse problem. So it doesn't always start there, but depending on the person and the amount of time that they spend unhoused, those things can come up as issues later down the line.
Yes, and which was another strong point that you made too, because a lot of times people assume that because you're on Skid Row, it's because you have some type of substance abuse problem or, some type of mental illness. And what you educated me on and told me that that's not always the case, that there's statistical data that supports the reasons why someone becomes homeless.
Hmm.
And down the line, it can become a mental situation. So, from your experience, what is the number one or, the top two or three leaders that cause a person to be homeless?
Finances is always going to be at the top for me. And then there is so many things that happen to people because of COVID, losing jobs, not having full-time work, issues with family. People get kicked out if they're living in a family situation. And then, mental health and drug abuse are still factors, but they're not the only factors. And one thing to know is if you ever want to look at statistics or data, that LAHSA, which is the LA Homeless Services Authority, has tons of data available on their website. And speaking of which, it's time for the annual homeless count. So I always encourage people to volunteer to go participate in the homeless count in their area because they use those numbers to ensure that there's enough resources and funding available to cover all of the people that are experiencing homelessness.
Okay. And this is literally going around and counting the number of homeless individuals.
Yes.
So, is it you just write their name on a piece of paper and
Well, they have definitely made some advancements technologically since COVID happened. They had to really figure out better ways to do it. So there's like apps that they use and
okay.
maps, and you get a little crash course in homeless count. It's a really good experience for people, and you really just literally go out and mark people where they are, how many people are in certain areas, if they're young, old, what their race or ethnic identity might be, because all of those factors get put into different categories when the data gets compiled.
I hear you. I thought you were making fun of me for saying paper instead of a tablet.
No, like really, that used to be the thing. We
Okay,
had
so
to
they
step
really
into
had
2020.
yes, yes. Okay, so and then you say finances, and then we discussed that a lot of times when it comes to certain communities, especially in like South LA and areas where they're predominantly, one race, that
Yes.
they get left behind financially. And you said, I'll allow you to touch on a little bit more of why that happens, but you did mention that people are getting left behind financially, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of your clients end up there. Is there information that you could give to support that?
Well, I will say that African Americans, while we make up, I think maybe about 10%, give or take, of the population in LA County, we make up about half of the homeless population. So that speaks volumes in and of itself, and it kind of connects us back to all of the stereotyping, the implicit bias that we experience as people of color, the discrimination in housing and jobs, the inequities in pay,
Hmm.
from African Americans to white, and then for us being women, it's also a whole different level of inequity scales and pay as well. So all of those things I think factor into people of color, specifically our people, being disproportionately homeless in consideration to other races.
Correct, correct. So, in your on your job day to day, when it comes to assisting in the supportive housing, can you give a little bit of background on what you do? Maybe someone is interested in it as a career or whatever the case may be.
Sure. Our company is a property and case management organization. So we provide property management and case management to residents. We have a little over 2,000 units, mostly concentrated within Skid Row. So I oversee the regional property managers, the maintenance team, the janitorial, and the property managers on site. And it's a very stressful job. There's never a dull day. I just got a text at 11:30 last night that we had one of our residents set fire to their unit. and cause substantial like property damage in the building. And that's like a regular occurrence for us. We get tons of people that might be in crisis and they do things like that. There's physical violence, there is like threats, there's so many things that happen on a day-to-day basis. You really have to be strong-minded, and you have to really be able to deal with high stress levels because there literally is something happening every day. I've been at this particular company for almost a year, and I don't think there's ever been just a day where nothing happened. So we handle a lot of that. We do, and then the case management team is who we work with to kind of meet the residents halfway because we practice housing first. So typically, if you were in like a market rate property and you set your unit on fire, you're out of there. But we don't practice that in permanent supportive housing because that is like contradictory to the goal of keeping people housed. So we will work with the individual with case management to get them help for whatever it is that they're experiencing that may have caused them to go into distress and kind of act out the way that they did. We work with like behavioral contracts to get them like steps to getting back to being okay, making sure that they're participating and being like good community residents and not causing harm or danger to the other residents in the building. So that's kind of
what you do. Yeah.
yeah.
So when you mentioned that, and definitely setting fire to the building is a quick arson, just you're out,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to court for that. But when it comes to you, the individuals that deal with a mental illness, you guys specifically place them in a specific complex or an environment.
Also, some of the buildings may have requirements, like we may have a property that is for people that are HIV positive, and that might be one community. But outside of that, there's not like this building has people that has mental health, this building has people that has drug issues. They're
Mhm.
all mixed up together.
Okay. And is that because of, I don't know, I want to say, is it a law or is it just trying to get them act? Okay.
So that is kind of the thing about housing first. So housing first means that housing is the first step to getting someone off the street. And the idea is that you can't think about getting a job or going back to school or any of those things if you don't have a place to rest your head safely every night. So
Mm-hmm.
housing is usually the first step. But another part of that is that you don't use anyone's physical, mental, or like drug history to separate them or segregate them from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't call that out. You just give them housing, and you don't, and then you put the case management on top of that, but you're not allowed to separate or call out that illness or disease as part of housing that person.
Okay, exactly. And then too, and when it comes to housing homeless too, or being homeless, it is important that you actually have an address as a reference for employment. And so that's important as well, especially when it comes
Exactly.
to housing first. All right.
Exactly.
Okay. And then was there anything additionally that you wanted to touch on in regards to, what you do and how you feel the community could actually assist in helping with the homeless crisis?
I think that education, honestly, is probably one of the most important things. There's such a stigma around homelessness. A lot of the laws that people come up with and try to pass will essentially criminalize someone for not having a place to sleep or having a home. And those are the kind of things that we want to get away from. You want to get away from trying to ban affordable housing in your community because that happens a lot as well. And a lot of housing projects get denied because they have an affordable aspect to them. 9 times out of 10, it might just be a few units that are affordable. And that doesn't mean that, you're going to get drug dealers or, sex offenders in your property. It just means that this person doesn't make the amount of money that other people might make and their rent is subsidized. So I think people can take the opportunities to educate themselves. There's so much data out there right now, and just kind of removing the stigma from being homeless and kind of understanding why it happens, how it happens, and I think that's really the first step to bringing the community together to support getting rid of the problem.
Right, which I agree. And then too, and when they are homeless, do they have to come? I think I can't recall. But when they're homeless, do they physically have to visit you at an office, or are there people that are on the ground that are visiting these people on Skid Row, getting their information? And in addition to that, are there people on Skid Row who are actively trying to find employment? And if they do, what address do they use if they're just trying to help themselves and get off the street?
So that's one of the things. So LAHSA, again, which is the Homeless Services Authority, has outreach teams that go across LA County. And those outreach teams, they're designed to connect people to resources if they want to get off the street, if they want to find housing. So LAHSA is the best company I could think of that actually provides a resource, and that is something that they're tasked with. And then there's also, if you know someone that's looking to be connected to a resource, there's the LAHOP, which is the Homeless Outreach Portal. And you can actually Google that and go online and put in the information of where you saw this person, if you have any like specific contact info, and then a person that works in outreach will connect with them to try to get them resources to find housing. And then for people that don't have addresses, I think that's kind of where it becomes tricky. So those are the people that need to be connected with some kind of provider or some kind of workforce development that can assist them until they do find housing.
Okay. And a question I have always had, just out of curiosity, and considering how crazy the weather is right now, when it's raining and storming all night, where do these homeless people go? Do you guys provide some type of like temporary housing for them, or what happens?
So there are like options for interim housing, and sometimes if people need beds in an emergency situation, you can call 211 and be connected to different resources. But there's also what we call winter shelters. So depending on when the rains like really get bad, usually from November like through March, there are what we call winter shelters that are open kind of across the county, and those are the temporary placement for people that need to come in off the street and escape any kind of bad weather.
Okay, that sounds good. So you gave a lot of good information. We didn't even have to use the entire 30 minutes.
Hey, I feel good.
You actually did a good, and then actually even in this conversation, I got a lot more information than I did before.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah, so that which is good. So I will ask you one more question just so from an agent perspective so we
Okay.
can know how it works. And we did touch on it in our last conversation too. Um how can from an agent perspective when it comes to assisting Skid Row and helping you guys find properties or even development options, what can we do to help the cause?
There's so many different avenues to help now. Like I think PRK, which is Project Room Key, which was LA County's response to COVID and getting people off the street and getting them temporarily housed in like hotels and motels across the county. That was a really big thing. But let's say you have an apartment building and you want to convert this apartment building into housing specifically for people that have been experiencing homelessness. There's different kinds of programs that they have that you can apply for. You can apply for funding to assist you with like turning your building into the appropriate like temporary shelter or interim housing facility. I recommend people going to the LAHSA website again, because that's a really great place to start. If you have a property that you want to lease or sell to the county, there's different areas in the county where you can go and research and connect with people that might look for leasing or purchasing opportunities from property owners across the city.
All right. Well, there you have it, you guys. That was a lot of information, and it was a lot of valuable information from Mia Jackson. I definitely want to thank you again for joining me today and giving me yet again so much information on ways that we can help homeless in Los Angeles area, especially in our urban communities, and try to do something in order to help the cause. So once again, I would like to thank you guys for joining me on another episode of Powerhouse You, and I will be seeing you again soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.
You're
All
welcome.
right.